I am a 35-year-old software developer living in Seattle. For 8 years, my marriage to Amanda seemed perfect on the surface. Then I noticed mysterious phone calls, password changes, and meetings with a friend I had never heard of. When I discovered her browser history, showing searches for divorce attorneys, I knew I had to act fast to protect what I had worked so hard to build. I made the quick decision to move my assets while investigating further. Before I tell you what happened after I moved my assets, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I turned the tables, when I discovered what my wife was really planning. I grew up in a middle-class family in Portland. My parents instilled in me the value of hard work and education. I put myself through college by working 2 jobs and taking out minimal student loans. The long hours were worth it when I graduated with a computer science degree and landed a great job at a tech firm in Seattle. During my junior year of college, I met Amanda in a psychology elective course. We connected instantly over our shared love of hiking, science fiction movies, and cooking. She had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. Her passion for interior design was obvious from the first time I visited her apartment, which looked like it belonged in a magazine despite her student budget constraints. Our courtship was filled with sweet moments that made me believe I had found my soulmate. We would spend weekends exploring hiking trails around Oregon, coming home exhausted but happy. On rainy days, we would cook elaborate meals together and watch old movies. When I got my job offer in Seattle, she was immediately supportive and decided to transfer to finish her design degree there. I proposed on a mountaintop after a difficult hike. The look of surprise and joy on her face convinced me I had made the right choice. Our wedding was a small ceremony with only close friends and family in attendance. We wrote our own vows, promising to support each other through whatever life threw at us. If only I had known then what those vows would really mean. The early years of our marriage were everything I had hoped for. We bought our first home, a fixer-upper that Amanda transformed with her design skills. I supported her when she decided to start her own interior design business after graduation. I believed in her talent so much that I invested $60,000 of my savings to help her get started. We set up joint accounts, sharing everything financially, because I trusted her completely. From the outside, our life seemed perfect. We hosted dinner parties where friends commented on how in love we still seemed. We took weekend trips to Victoria and Portland. We were even starting to discuss having children, though Amanda always seemed to find reasons to delay. The first small changes in her behavior began about 6 months before my discovery. She started working later, claiming she was meeting with clients. She became protective of her phone, changing the password and angling the screen away when I was nearby. I dismissed my concerns, telling myself she was just stressed about building her client base. If only I had paid more attention to those first warning signs. As the weeks passed, the subtle behavior changes I had noticed became more pronounced. Amanda started staying even later at work, sometimes not coming home until after I was asleep. She installed a fingerprint lock on her phone, after years of us knowing each other's passwords. The physical affection that had been a constant in our relationship diminished until even a hug felt forced. There were new friends in her life. Suddenly, people she went out with after work, but never invited home. People whose names she mentioned casually but who somehow never materialized at our social gatherings. I found myself increasingly isolated from her professional life. The incident that first seriously alarmed me happened during a dinner party we hosted for some mutual friends. I overheard Amanda in the kitchen speaking in hushed tones on her phone. Her exact words were, "What if he finds out before everything is in place? We need to wait until the timing is right." When she saw me standing there, she quickly ended the call and claimed it was just a difficult client. Around the same time, Amanda developed a sudden intense interest in our finances. She started asking specific questions about my retirement accounts, our investments, and the equity in our home. Questions she had never cared about before. She suggested we review our life insurance policies and update our wills. At the time, I thought she was finally taking an interest in our financial future. Then I found the secret credit card statements. While cleaning our home office, I discovered statements for a card I did not know existed. The purchases were mostly small, but there were several charges for hotels in the city where we lived. Why would she need a hotel room in Seattle? The following month, Amanda told me she was going on a weekend trip with college friends. When I asked which friends, she mentioned names I had never heard before in 8 years of marriage. I checked her social media connections that night and found no one matching those names. The final confirmation came when I used her laptop to check our shared calendar while mine was updating. The browser history revealed multiple searches for divorce attorneys in Seattle websites explaining Washington state divorce laws and articles with titles like, "How to Get the Best Settlement in a Divorce." My world collapsed around me. That same night, I checked her email when she left her laptop open to take a shower. There, it was an email thread with a divorce attorney discussing initial consultation fees and availability. The subject line read, "Consultation for Potential Divorce Proceedings." I can still remember the physical sensation of reading those words. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. My hands shook so badly I could hardly close the laptop before she returned. That night, I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a stranger was sleeping next to me. The next day, I tried to indirectly confront her by asking if everything was okay with us. Her response was dismissive. She patted my hand and said, "Of course, honey. Why would you ask that?" Her eyes never met mine. For the next week, I experienced anxiety attacks whenever she was out of the house. I could not eat or sleep. I lost 7 pounds in that week alone. Finally, I confided in my friend James, who worked as a financial advisor. His advice was simple but jarring. Protect yourself while you figure out what is happening. I knew I needed to act quickly but carefully. My entire financial future might depend on the decisions I made in the next few days. After talking with James, I spent hours researching divorce laws in Washington state. I learned that as a community property state, most assets acquired during marriage would be subject to a 50-50 split. However, the courts had significant discretion in determining what was fair and equitable, especially when one spouse had contributed financially to the other's business. I scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney, making it clear I was not filing yet but needed to understand my options. The attorney explained that in situations where one spouse had funded the other's business, courts sometimes awarded a larger portion of assets to the funding spouse as compensation. However, this would require documentation and proper legal arguments. The attorney also warned me that once divorce proceedings began, there would be automatic financial restraining orders, preventing either party from moving, hiding, or disposing of assets. However, taking steps to secure assets beforehand, as long as they were documented and not hidden, could be perfectly legal. During this time, I discovered more disturbing evidence. Amanda had a separate bank account I had never known about. Our joint account showed regular cash withdrawals over the past 3 months, always just under $1,000, likely to avoid triggering bank reporting requirements. She was building a financial cushion while planning to leave me. I also learned how vulnerable joint accounts are during divorce. Either party can legally withdraw all funds until a court order says otherwise. The thought of Amanda potentially emptying our accounts the moment she filed for divorce terrified me. I struggled with the ethical implications of moving assets. Was I becoming as deceptive as she was? But the evidence was overwhelming, and the potential financial ruin I faced if I did nothing was too great. I decided to take protective measures while maintaining complete documentation to prove I was not hiding assets, just securing them. First, I moved my retirement accounts to different financial institutions. While the value would still be considered in divorce proceedings, this prevented any unauthorized access. I transferred a portion of our savings to a separate account in my name, keeping detailed records of the transfers and amounts. I made sure to leave sufficient funds in our joint accounts for regular expenses and documented every penny. I also started cataloging all our financial records, including the evidence of Amanda's secret account and cash withdrawals. I took screenshots of her browser history showing divorce research and created a timeline of her suspicious activities. If this came to court, I wanted to demonstrate that my actions were a reasonable response to her covert planning. During this investigation, I discovered credit inquiries on our report from apartment complexes. She was looking for a place to live after leaving me. I even found emails confirming she had toured several apartments, all within walking distance of her design studio. Despite the mounting evidence, I still experienced moments of doubt. Was I jumping to conclusions? Was there some innocent explanation I had missed? But each new discovery reinforced my suspicions. I began preparing emotionally for the confrontation I knew was coming. For 2 weeks, I maintained an excruciating normalcy at home. I acted as though nothing had changed while watching her every move for additional evidence. I noticed she was making more phone calls from our back porch, speaking in hushed tones. She scheduled several long lunches with her attorney disguised as client meetings in her calendar. The tension in our home was palpable, though neither of us acknowledged it. I felt like I was living with a stranger, someone who was carefully plotting against me while smiling to my face each morning. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined, but I forced myself to stay calm and strategic. Everything would come to a head soon, and I needed to be prepared. It was a Tuesday evening when Amanda finally showed her hand. She came home later than usual, carrying a manila envelope. Her expression was a practiced mix of regret and determination. I was sitting at our kitchen island reviewing work emails, but my heart started racing the moment I saw that envelope. "Billy, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady. "I have been thinking about this for a long time, and I think we should separate." I nodded slowly, keeping my face neutral as she placed the envelope on the counter and slid it toward me. Inside were divorce papers already drawn up by her attorney. The petition requested an unequal distribution of assets based on my investment in her business and asked for temporary maintenance while the divorce proceeded. What she said next confirmed everything. "I have already talked to the bank about our accounts, but there seems to be some confusion. Did you make some changes recently?" The look of genuine shock on her face when I calmly explained that I had indeed moved some assets to separate accounts was almost worth the pain of the preceding weeks. Her composure cracked visibly. "You had no right to do that," she snapped, her carefully rehearsed speech forgotten. "Those are our marital assets. Just like the secret account you opened 3 months ago," I asked, sliding my own folder across the counter. "Just like the $5,000 in cash withdrawals you have made. Or the apartment tours you have been taking." Her face paled. She started to deny it, but I opened the folder to reveal printouts of her email confirmations for apartment viewings, bank statements showing her withdrawals, and screenshots of her browser history. "I know everything, Amanda," I said quietly. "I know you have been planning this divorce for months. I know you have been meeting with your attorney to strategize how to get the maximum settlement. I know about the business partnership you have been hiding." Her denial turned to fury. "You spied on me. How dare you invade my privacy?" I remained calm. "How dare you plot to take half of everything I have worked for while lying to my face?" I asked. "How dare you hide your business success to maximize what you could take from me in a divorce?" That was when the truth finally emerged. Her business had become profitable over a year ago, far more so than she had let on. She had been hiding income and understating her success. The real plan, which she eventually admitted during our heated argument, was to claim she was financially dependent on me while secretly building her own security. The most painful revelation came when she made a panicked phone call to her attorney with me sitting right there. I heard her say, "He moved the money. He knows about everything. What do we do now?" The attorney must have delivered bad news because her face fell as she listened. When she hung up, she looked defeated. Her attorney had confirmed what I already knew: my actions were legal as long as I had documented everything properly and was not hiding assets. Her strategy of claiming financial dependence while seeking an unequal asset distribution was now seriously compromised. Amanda switched tactics instantly. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for my hand. "Billy, I never really wanted this. The divorce was just a negotiation tactic. I thought if you believed I was leaving, you would agree to invest more in my business expansion." I pulled my hand away, disgusted by the manipulation. "So you were using the threat of divorce to extort more money from me?" She flinched at the word extort but did not deny it. Her ultimatum was clear: invest more in her business under new terms that gave me less ownership interest, or she would proceed with the divorce. She seemed genuinely shocked when I stood firm and told her I would rather divorce than be manipulated. What I saw in that moment was not the woman I had loved for 8 years, but someone I barely recognized. Someone willing to use our marriage as leverage who had been lying to me for months while planning to take as much as she could. The realization was both heartbreaking and strangely liberating. Her carefully constructed plan had backfired completely. Instead of catching me unprepared and vulnerable, she was now facing a husband who was fully informed and legally protected. When she realized her advantage was gone, she broke down, alternating between accusations, pleas for understanding, and attempts to rewrite her intentions. The woman I had built a life with, shared dreams with, and supported unconditionally, had been planning my financial demise while sleeping beside me every night. No betrayal had ever cut so deep. In the days that followed our confrontation, Amanda underwent a dramatic transformation. The cold, secretive woman of the previous months was replaced by someone desperate to reconcile. She began coming home early, cooking my favorite meals, and suggesting couples therapy. She claimed repeatedly that the divorce filing was a mistake, a moment of temporary insanity. I was not fooled. The evidence of her long-term planning was too substantial to dismiss as a momentary lapse in judgment. When I refused to simply forgive and forget, she became increasingly desperate, trying every emotional angle she could think of. I found myself consulting not just with my attorney but also with a therapist who specialized in emotional manipulation. The therapist helped me recognize the classic patterns of manipulation. Amanda was employing guilt, nostalgia, false promises, and when those failed, anger and blame. We agreed to meet with a mediator to discuss separation terms, which is when Amanda realized I truly intended to proceed with the divorce. She made several attempts to access our accounts again, calling the banks to try to override the changes I had made. Fortunately, I had already warned them about the potential for disputed transactions. Her family began calling me, expressing concern and pressuring me to work things out. It became clear they had heard a heavily edited version of events. I remained firm, but factual, refusing to engage in character assassination, despite the temptation. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I received an anonymous email with photos of Amanda and her business partner Thomas in intimate situations at a hotel. The timestamp showed the photos were taken during one of her supposed business trips. While the revelation of her affair was painful, it explained so much about her behavior and reinforced that I was making the right decision. When confronted with this evidence, Amanda finally abandoned all pretense. She admitted that her business had been thriving for over a year. She had hidden its success to strengthen her claim for financial support during the divorce. Thomas, her business partner and lover, had helped her devise the strategy to maximize her financial gain. Most disturbing was her admission that they had planned to use my investment to expand the business after the divorce was finalized, effectively using my own money to build their new life together. The calculated nature of the betrayal left me stunned. Despite the emotional turmoil, I maintained my resolve to handle the separation with dignity. I worked with my attorney to propose a fair division of assets that accounted for my investment in her business but did not seek punitive measures. My calm, reasonable approach contrasted sharply with her increasingly erratic behavior. Our mutual friends, initially uncertain about what had happened between us, began to see the situation more clearly as Amanda's contradictory explanations unraveled. Without me having to say a word, many realized who had really betrayed whom in our relationship. When Amanda finally accepted that her manipulation tactics were not working, she moved out of our home. She took only her personal belongings, knowing that the division of our other assets would be determined legally. The house felt both empty and peaceful without her presence. We proceeded with a mediated divorce rather than a contentious court battle. The documentation I had gathered proved invaluable in these negotiations. In the end, we agreed to a division that was actually quite close to the 50-50 split mandated by state law, with additional compensation to me for my business investment. The irony was that had she been honest from the beginning, the outcome might not have been much different. The day we signed the final divorce papers, Amanda attempted one last emotional appeal. With tears in her eyes, she claimed she had made a terrible mistake and still loved me. Looking at her, I felt nothing but a quiet sadness for the years we had shared and the future we had lost. No amount of crying could rebuild the trust that had been so thoroughly destroyed. I walked away that day, not as a victim, but as someone who had protected himself from a carefully orchestrated betrayal. The marriage was over, but I had preserved my dignity and financial future. The first month alone in our house was the hardest. I kept expecting to hear her key in the door, to smell her perfume in the hallway. But as weeks passed, I began to reclaim the space as my own. I renovated the home office where I had discovered her secret credit card statements, transforming it into a music room where I could play guitar, something she had always complained was too noisy. I committed to weekly therapy sessions to process the betrayal and understand why I had missed the signs. My therapist helped me recognize that trust is not a weakness, but blind trust can be. I learned to balance openness with appropriate boundaries. Reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my marriage became a priority. I was surprised by how many people welcomed me back into their lives without judgment. Through these renewed friendships, I discovered parts of myself that had been suppressed in my marriage. Amanda had subtly discouraged my interest in mountain biking and live music, calling them immature pursuits. Financially, I rebuilt my savings with a new perspective on security. I diversified my investments and educated myself about financial planning. The lessons learned through betrayal became valuable tools for building a more secure future. I threw myself into work, finding that the focus required for coding provided respite from emotional turmoil. My innovations at work earned me a promotion 6 months after the divorce was finalized. The professional success was satisfying, but I was careful not to use it as an escape from processing my emotions. Dating again seemed impossible at first. The thought of being vulnerable with someone new terrified me. But about 8 months after the divorce, I agreed to a coffee date with someone a friend had introduced me to. I was honest about my recent divorce and trust issues. To my surprise, my honesty was met with appreciation rather than judgment. Through a tech conference, I reconnected with Jessica, an acquaintance from college who had gone through a similar experience. Our friendship developed slowly, built on a foundation of shared understanding and explicit conversations about trust. We established clear expectations about finances and privacy from the beginning, something I now recognized as essential rather than optional in any relationship. The most unexpected lesson came during my final interaction with Amanda nearly a year after our divorce. We met briefly to sign documents, transferring the last of our shared investment account. She looked tired and unhappy. Without prompting, she acknowledged that her plan had been short-sighted and ultimately self-defeating. I had spent months imagining what I would say if she ever admitted her wrongdoing. But sitting across from her, I realized that forgiveness was not about absolving her, but about freeing myself from the weight of resentment. I simply nodded and wished her well, meaning it more than I had expected to. That evening, I met with my financial advisor to establish a comprehensive plan for the next 10 years. As we discussed retirement goals and investment strategies, I recognized how differently I approached these decisions now. I had learned to balance optimism with prudence, trust with verification. Looking back on the experience from the perspective of a year, I could see how much I had grown. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had instead forced me to build a stronger foundation for my life. I had learned to trust my instincts, to recognize red flags, and to act decisively to protect myself without becoming bitter. The most profound insight was that self-worth should never be tied to a relationship status. The end of my marriage was not a reflection of my value as a person or partner. It was simply the result of another person's choices I could not control but could certainly respond to. I no longer view vulnerability as a risk to be avoided, but as a strength to be offered carefully to those who have earned it. True intimacy requires openness, but that openness must be built on a foundation of demonstrated trustworthiness, not just assumed. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself after betrayal? Drop a comment below sharing how you rebuilt trust in your life. If this story helped you recognize warning signs in your own relationship, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life experiences that might help others. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that surviving betrayal is possible and that something stronger can emerge from the broken pieces. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your ability to trust again is not determined by those who have broken your trust in the past.